You are at the University of Karate again, and we're here with Sensei Mike Biddle. We're going to be studying another episode or another look at Uechi-Ryu as a exercise, the Sanchin kata as an exercise, and the type of exercise seen in Uechi-Ryu, the half-hard, half-soft system, and the type of body development it creates. We're going to talk about a number of things, looking at the development of the body where in Uechi-Ryu, there is a different type of body development than weightlifting that develops the size of the muscle as opposed to the knitting and density of the muscle, the postures and forms that are used along with dynamic tension that create tendon strength as opposed to just muscular strength, the tucking of the hips and the right postures of Uechi-Ryu that create posterior chain development, the development of the back and the gluteus maximus and all these different types of muscles that are sometimes ignored in modern kickboxing and so on. We want to delve into a number of ways by which we see the exercise, the development, the muscular, the body development aspects of Uechi-Ryu and have conversation about that prayerfully will open and give enlightenment to people that are on this path to see to a greater degree the path that they're on of body development and why they're developing certain muscles. So I'm going to ask Sensei Biddle that, what type of body development, what are some of the special muscles that are being developed and methods in Uechi-Ryu and why? Just jump into that.
Well, this is a funny thing. If I was going to advise somebody, and I've been in sports and fitness my entire life, so I did bodybuilding, I did weightlifting, I was one of the best in the country in trampoline and different sports. So I've spent my entire life in physics and physical principles and exercise technology and things like that. I worked at general nutrition centers. I spent a lot of time with bodybuilders. I worked out with bodybuilders. So I have some backgrounds that are outside of what you would consider the norms for a typical martial artist. So as a fitness advisor, and what I know now and what I've learned over my years, if I was going to advise somebody on what to train, and the best muscles in the body to train, I would tell you to say what John just said, the posterior chain of muscles, glutes, hamstrings, lats, the back part of the body. Not to neglect the front, but the back part of the muscles, back part of the body, the latissimus muscles, the glutes, and the hamstrings probably comprise more than 90% of the muscle mass of the body. So if you want to actually do a really good workout and you want to burn a lot of calories and you want to build a lot of ability, use and develop those muscles. If you want to learn abilities in different sports, running, golf, throwing, rotational sports, tennis, develop the posterior chain part of the body. That's where you should spend your time. This whole stuff on core, core is an illusion. I'm not going to go into that. We'll talk about that later. Core is a very small part of your body. If you look at your obliques and your abdominals, they're important. Again, I don't neglect any part of my body, but if you're going to spend time working on something, that posterior chain is the most important. With that said, let's apply that to Sanchin. In Sanchin, if you do it properly and you're instructed properly in the proper form of that, when you sink down and you tuck your hips, you're going to tighten. In order to move those hips forward, you don't just push your hips forward. You roll your hips underneath by tightening the glutes and the hamstrings. That's that part of the body. When you pull your elbows in, you bring the shoulders down, and you pull. With that, you're pulling at your lats, and you're developing the entire posterior chain of the body. Through time, if you practice that properly, you will find that it'll functionally aid you in almost everything else. In addition to that, all of the movements in the forms and the katas, the positional, I'll call it positional strength development. If you pull your thumb across your palm, and my instructor used to make us pull it all the way across and hold it tight, then he would try to pull it apart. He would curl our fingers over in the Sanchin position, and then make sure that you could resist him. He would make sure your joints were turned properly, because if your wrists are turned properly and your elbows are positioned properly, and we had exact dimensions for that, your elbow had to be a fist and a thumb from your hip. exactly, and inside your hip line. If you did that and then you pulled down and you got in those positions, you would create tension in every part of your body that's connected to those positions. Your fingers gain strength, your thumb gains strength, your forearm gains strength, your lats gain strength, even the small muscles. And this is a very important thing. When John alluded to tendon strength, what we're really talking about is small muscle strength. So people that lift weights and develop strength, it's fine. I lifted weights. I did all that. I'm not against any of that. It's better than something else. But it's limited in that if you always develop the big muscles and you neglect the little muscles, you are going to get hurt. Yeah. So as part of that analysis, I did damage to my lower back when I was lifting weights because I was like everybody else trying to put up too much weight and do things. I started rounding the vertebrae in the lower part of my back. I started having severe back problems. It got to the point where sometimes I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't walk. And I went to a good friend of mine who was a chiropractor, and he took an x-ray of my lower back, and he showed me that my vertebrae were rounding. Because when I was doing overhead presses, I was arching my back, so the vertebrae were literally grinding together. And he told me, Mike, if you don't stop lifting weights and doing this, you're going to be on a wheelchair before you're 25. So I quit lifting weights, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I thought, well, karate would be fun, so that's what I did. So the fascinating thing about that was, so I had chronic back problems where my back would just seize and my muscles would lock. I couldn't hardly even move. I would literally get, for years even after I stopped lifting weights, my back would lock up. But a miracle happened. Sanchin. When I started, I'm sorry, I am a little emotional about this because it changed my life. When I started doing Sanchin and I learned to roll my hips under and straighten the spine and bring that tension in, it cured my back problem. I never had it again. Wow. Now, the only time that it occasionally has come back, but I found that if I work very hard on Sanchin posture, it goes away. So I have a chronic condition, but if I maintain the proper positioning of the hips and the shoulders and the back, and it's musculature. There's a lot of new science about how a lot of people's problems are muscle related, and there's a whole new thing coming out. I know somebody that's on the front edge of that. It'll be a thing, but they're curing a lot of things, spinal problems without surgery, but with muscles. Most people's problems are because of imbalance of muscle conditioning. One muscle is weaker and it creates pressure on another. And it's only natural to think about that. And in my case, it's twofold. One, it was the vertebrae, but two, because I created a better muscular structure in my lower back and that posterior chain, it fixed the positions that my spine was getting in that caused the nerve problem to flare up. So that's incredibly important to understand, is if you practice the right form, and my instructor was a absolute fanatic on technique and form. You had to be perfect. The wrists had to be at the right angles. The elbows had to be turned in so much. Your hands could not be too wide or too narrow in your Sanchin position, and we measured that. Your hands could not be too high or too low. We measured that. There's a purpose to all that. That did something. It created strength in the body. It creates a unification of the muscles and creates the strength in the small muscles, which is what I started with. And that's what's important. The small muscles are your control muscle groups. Sure, you have your big lats, you have your big biceps, etc. But you also have there's numerous muscles that support those systems in the body. If those are neglected, you are going to have problems. And if you do proper karate form in Sanchin, in the proper form, you are going to avoid those extreme problems. If you want to lift weights, that's fine. I did. I was a proponent of that. I still do some to this day. But that's just to enhance something, but not to replace something else. I would not, if someone said, take your pick, you're going to lift weights or do your forms, what would you do? I'll never touch a weight again. And I won't be much less, I'll be the same strength that I was before, except moderately so in certain areas.
I think that this is going to be revolutionary for some people that are hearing this, because even though they do talk about working out, karate or kung fu or martial arts, working out, but to look at Sanchin as a exercise, to see the perfect blend of self-defense or martial arts and an exercise that actually can heal and strengthen the body, is revolutionary for people to think of. You have any more comments on that topic?
Yeah, I want to say one more thing. It's funny because there's science coming out now where they're talking about one of the most effective forms of exercise to strengthen the body is what they call, well, I don't know what they call it, but Bruce Lee actually did this, and this is where the study came from. He would stand against the wall and push against the wall as hard as he could. So it's pushing against an immovable object. But Sanchin creates that same movement in its dynamic tension, because when you're moving and you're resisting each movement, you're working both sides of the muscle. And they're now finding out that the actual firing of the nervous system within the muscular system in those type of movements are superior to weight training. That's cutting edge stuff, and I think we'll hear more about that as time goes on.
It's interesting that you said that, because I remember, and we talked about this a few minutes ago before we started recording, that when I was in Tokyo studying under Master Isamu Uhara, he talked about how his father used something that they did in Goju, but he felt it was very effective, where basically they would do Sanchin, but rather than have the finger straight and erect out, they would make a fist in that Sanchin position, and someone would stand in front of them and basically put their hands over their fists, and the person would do like they're going to do a regular strike with the fist, pull the hand back, but this hand was over their hand. They would actually lean back into you, and you have to push them out. All their physical body weight, boom, you have to push it out, and then go back to Sanchin, and then make a step. You have to, again, take their body weight back and push it out. So you were actually doing that type of exercise. And he mentioned that we have to look at Sanchin not only as a kata, not only as a set of form to develop an understanding of movement, but also as an exercise. And in that way, Sanchin was an exercise. Also, using weighted jars was something that came from China as well, that some other Okinawan styles do. They had the weighted jars where they would grab the weighted jars and they would walk with them and move through Sanchin with them. To exercise to science today is now talking about kettlebells. Everyone's into kettlebells and this ballistic use of force and how tremendously it develops the body and the muscles. And Sanchin is used not with a kettlebell, but again with a weighted device where basically you're doing what was called a farmer's carry or a suitcase carry. It's the same thing. Exercise science today is all about things that are as ancient as Sanchin. Also, in Seisan, that jump, exercise science is really into box jumping and so on, and getting this ballistic and explosive power by doing jumping. Again, that Seisan jump, if it's exercise, if it's practiced as they do in Tokyo, this actually develops not only explosive power in the lower posterior chain, but also the balance of crane. Why don't you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, there's another thing I want to throw in there as a quick segue to that. Is everybody's doing box jumps and plyometrics now, where they're jumping up boxes and jumping down boxes, and I did that a number of years. It's one of the most effective ways to increase speed and power. The Chinese invented plyometrics quite a bit ago, because what they used to do is dig a hole, not a very deep hole at first, and you jump in the hole and you jump out of the hole. Then you take a few more shovels out, you jump in the hole and you jump out of the hole. Then they take more shovels out, you jump in the hole, they jump out of the hole. When you can successfully jump your entire height, then you'd figured it out. Plyometrics, thousands of years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's funny because there's been such an emphasis over the years on weightlifting and strength training, and it's a good thing, because if you're sitting on a couch and you're not doing anything, that's not very good. But martial arts, if you're doing the proper strengthening, the proper forms, the proper dynamic tension, you're actually creating a tremendous amount of useful strength. if you're just throwing barbells around and you've got strong biceps and stuff, and you've not worked the supporting joints and the supporting structures, you're setting yourself up for injury, as in my case and many others. And there's a lot of new exercise that's come out lately that, and I'm not going to get into names or anything, it doesn't matter, but they want you to do more, faster, harder, and that's only got a one-way street to injury. Mm-hmm. So, and the question I ask people is, when you're 25 years old, you can pretty much do anything you want, and you're at your peak physical conditioning from that point to about 35, and then the rest is downhill. So whatever you do in that period of time, and that's only a short period of your life, let's say 10 years of your life, and you're going to live 70 or 80 years. So 10 years out of those years, or the remainder of your life, if you're not functionally able to move and bend over and do the things that life wants you to be able to do, then what was the point? You spent 10 years of your life to ruin the rest of your life. I have anecdotal proof of people that I have trained in karate over the years where I had a kid come into my class. He was, they had taken him to therapy. He couldn't move. He couldn't do a push-up. He couldn't do a sit-up. He was sort of like autistic, but physically almost epileptic-like. And in 6 months, I had him doing push-ups and sit-ups and moving, and it was mostly from doing the Sanchin form. When I had the school that I had at the time, when I closed it, the mom came to me and cried. She said, "I've never seen my son do this." And I said, "Well, keep him in it, because this is what will fortify his body. Even though his body doesn't communicate well with his muscles, this is what we're training." And that's what the martial arts, done properly, and I emphasize that properly, is developed to do. Because in developing China, the monks weren't interested in just killing people. They wanted to be able to pray and fast and do the things that they did in order to sustain their body and be capable of doing that in their late ages. And if you watch martial artists that are old, they all are moving better than most people that are just barely hobbling around. Other types of activities, you can get injured and you're going to hurt yourself, and what are you going to do for the rest of your life?
I wanted to have you kind of rehearse a story that you told me, but in the context of, again, we're still talking about exercise, because here's an exercise that many people don't really think about, which is breathing, which is a very vital part of Sanchin that people don't think about. But again, it's a superior, not only muscular and tendon and small muscle development system, spinal development system, as we've been talking about, but also it's an excellent breathing exercise. Tell our listeners the story of what your doctor told you when he tested and listened to your breathing and what he thought you did for a living.
Yeah. So I went in for a physical. This is probably a year or two after I was doing Uechi-Ryu, and he did a physical, and he puts a stethoscope on your chest and says, "Take a deep breath." And of course I did, but my chest didn't rise. My stomach expanded because I breathed with the lower part of my lungs. And I'll explain that in a second. So when I took a deep breath, he goes, "Oh," he says, "Are you a singer or do you play a musical instrument?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Well," he says, "the reason I ask is because you breathe correctly." He said, "Nobody comes in here and does this unless they're a trained musician or singer." I said, "Well, it's martial arts. I was trained to breathe properly." He goes, "Oh, okay, well, that makes sense." So that's the interesting thing about breathing. And as the expression goes, breath is life. Our lungs are bell-shaped. 1/3 of the lungs is at the top, and the 2/3, the biggest part, is at the bottom. 95% of the people in the world, if not more, breathing correctly. You ask them to take a deep breath and they expand their chest. No. If you take a deep breath properly, your belly will expand, but your chest will remain flat because you are filling the bottom 2/3. And the in and out also gets the top third. We have breathing exercises where we used to practice that. But if you practice Sanchin correctly and are taught how to do it correctly, the breathing exercise is irrelevant. Because when you're doing Sanchin, and again, when I say correctly, I'm very importantly stressing that when you're breathing, you're pushing down. And the concept of down is in your stomach as well. You sink down, so you push the breath down in the stomach and the stomach is going to expand. Now, after you've watched this video, go watch a video of Master Uechi in his 60s doing his kata. His stomach was expanded. It was rounded. No, it doesn't look like the six-pack. But he's forcing his breath down, and his stomach has expanded. So you expand, you push the air down, and that goes through the top third. Oxygen is gathered there. It goes down to the bottom. It sits, and then you learn to exhale properly, and it takes the maximum benefit of the entire use of the lungs. Otherwise, you're spending the entire life using 1/3 of your lungs, and that is probably more than 95% of the people on the earth. If you watch a baby in a crib breathing, you will see his stomach rise and fall, not his chest. What happens there? I don't know, but I figure it's some doctor going, take a deep breath, and expanding their chest and showing them how to do it incorrectly, and then they do it wrong. I recently tested all my grandkids. They're all 8 and 9 years old. They breathe incorrectly. My grandson, who's 3, he still breathes correctly. Hopefully I can fix and make sure he doesn't get messed up as well.
Do you have any comments on, again, keeping that same vein of exercise, the exercise of breathing, do you have any comments on the sound that Uechi breathing makes, the that sound that almost like I've considered in the sense of almost tensing the stomach a little bit, putting the tongue on the roof of the mouth and so on. Do you have any comments or anything you would want to share concerning that in exercise context?
Yeah, I will in a rudimentary place on this video, but yeah, the tongue should go at the roof of the mouth. The roof of your mouth is shaped for your tongue. It should stay there, but we don't. We've lost that ability. Sanchin, you put that tongue at the roof of the palate, and the breathing, when that exhalation is created, that sharp exhalation, it creates a tightness in the stomach, and that also aids in taking an impact if you need to. It also, and again, I won't go into all the details of it, but that's probably a separate video alone, but it creates a component of power in your strike. It's always fascinating to me, and I'll reference this, but again, this is probably another one, where people in Sanchin, when they're breathing and they keep doing their Sanchin breathing, and then they have to stop and take a big inhale. And that just means it's a functional problem with the way they're breathing. You should be able to finish your kata without inhaling. You should be able to and not have to go. Something's going wrong there. If you're 3/4 of the way through your kata and then you've done something wrong. I'm going to leave it there because that's another topic.
Let's close with one last thing, and this is just something that I thought was interesting. This maybe delves out of the area of exercise, but then again, it is an area of exercise. Most times when we talk about Sanchin, the way that we generally see it taught with general students, when I say general students, I mean people that are generally coming to class, not necessarily more devoted, more higher level students, but generally what we see is 4 strikes, turn 4 strikes, turn 4 strikes, that pattern. However, I know that Saburohara in Japan, he died at 65. His son, Isamu, Sensei George Krob, who's pretty famous, he's passed away as well, followed the same pattern of breaking that pattern. And also Kainai Uechi, you see when you look at some videos, this not necessarily doing 4, 4, and 4, but basically doing a set of 6 or whatever, just go in a direction until he tells you to turn and come back, where you're getting a lot more strikes, a lot more. Again, this delves out of the area of exercise, but it's also kind of breaking a pattern, a theme that you go into a lot. You want to say anything about that before we close?
Yeah, it's about nervous system. We do 4, 4, and 4. We always step left. I mean, maybe some schools always step right to do the after the double strikes. Master Uechi did both directions, and he sometimes did 3, sometimes he did 4. I think ultimately it's okay to do 4, 4, 4, but the problem is it locks you into a certain pattern, a certain predictable pattern, a certain neural pattern within your body, and I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but I have spent a lot of time looking into neural research and stuff like that. But because you set a pattern in your brain develops that highway, so that's what it's going to use. So you're always going to step left. And then you're going so that sequence becomes ingrained, just like when you walk a certain way, you breathe a certain way, you can't change that. But if you break those patterns, then you become less predictable. And it's really the most unusual thing I did, and to my students and myself, and John knows this because I did it to him, was we always do the kata in one direction. I call it right-hand kata. Don't do it that way. Reverse it. Do it the other way. So instead of opening with your left, open with your right. Instead of doing kanshibo, going to the left, go to your right. Do seisan the other way around, so you're using the other hands. Use both hands, break those patterns. If you always use the same hand for doing the same thing, that's what you're going to do in a self-defense situation. That's probably the most dangerous thing that you can do. And I see people, if you do a million kata and you're always doing them the same way, that's what you're going to do in a self-defense situation, and you cannot change that. That is not going to change. It's impossible to change. You can't change your breathing. Mm-hmm. You can, and that's a great example because we talked about breathing and we talked about patterns. If you're breathing correctly, you can sit here and concentrate and do it by breathing and forcing your stomach out and forcing the air down and then exhale. But then when you go back into daily life and you forget about it, you will not breathe that way. And you will not breathe that way in a self-defense situation. You cannot manufacture that. That has to be trained. That has to be developed. And that's something that's really critically important in your ultimate martial art development is you've got to break patterns. Seisan, Sanchin, and Sansei-Ryu are the three original kata, and Sansei-Ryu will break the patterns, but we have to understand that. And I don't want to go into it now, but that is the stepping alone is a very simple way of breaking the patterns. So here's a test for you. When you go to brush your hair, use your other hand. When you shave, if you're a man, shave, you have a pattern for shaving, and you do it every time. You're going to start on one side, work to the other, or start in one place and work to the other. Don't do that. I try to break patterns in every part of my daily life. If you go one way to work, you're always going to go that way. Don't go that way. Go another way. Your brain is the benefit for that. Your central nervous system benefits that. Break all the patterns. When I first saw Master Uechi, I was studying the neural patterns for a specific reason. And when I saw him varying the patterns, I was actually stunned. I'm like, oh, he knows this. He's breaking the patterns. And those patterns shouldn't be predictable. They should be random.
Wow. We're going to put a comma there. Again, we have been hopefully enlightening some that are listening, maybe all that are listening, with some of these concepts and the way that we're bringing out some of these under-examined, understudied, or maybe not even really talked about aspects of Uechi-Ryu and this half-hard, half-soft system. This is Mike Biddle that you've been listening to, and we're going to come again with another series of talks soon. But right now, we're going to put a comma there until we come again. This is the University of Karate, and you've been listening to our talks concerning science, history, physics, kinesiology, body development, mental development, and all the different disciplines that go together to make what we know as martial arts and the history of them. We hope that you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. And again, look to see us with another video very soon. Thank you so much.